with respect to our authenticity, I think it's wonderful to hear you give encouragement for folks who may feel like they're terminally shy, or some people just define themselves as the center of attention, as if that's just how they are. Whereas that's probably just a mode that they're comfortable with and have done for a while and has worked, and suits other aspects of their personality. But I wonder then if, I was wondering, and this might touch upon the domain known as transpersonal psychology. Well, we come here not as tabula rasas, and not just because our genetics and childhood experiences either, because I think it's highly likely that we've had some lives prior. Now, when we do, incarnate into this PMR, how much are we affected by the personality, so to speak, of who we are more largely? And is it worth using psi means, meditation, to try to discover what that is during our process? I imagine it has to be helpful to some degree because, it's more information. And if it comes from a place where we're not trying to just imagine, being some kind of royalty or, a famous scientist or artist, someone extremely accomplished, but like getting a more general sense of how and who one is. What do you think about that as an endeavor? Or is that just, kind of overly self-centered and self-involved?
Yeah, I don't think that's really going to be very helpful to do those sorts of things. I think meditation is a really good idea, to start with meditation or to learn how to meditate. Because what happens when you meditate is you get to know yourself. It's you viewing you coming to grips with your own consciousness and your own feelings. And if you try a little bit, you can also understand what your own fears are. You can explore those fears. What is it that makes you uneasy? What is it that makes you kind of shrink? What is it that makes you feel insecure and not so worthwhile, or like you don't want to say anything? You want to kind of shrink off into the shadows someplace. What is it that makes you feel that way? And in a meditation state, your intellect is not the main thing that's functioning. It's your intuition. So in a meditation state, you're not real intellectual. You feel more than you figure out. You're not being analytical. You're just experiencing. It's just an experience, not a logical deduction. So having those experiences in a meditation state will basically acquaint you with yourself. You get to know your own consciousness. You'll get to know how you are. And you have to be non-judgmental, because if you say, oh, I'm that way, that's not very good. I don't want to be that way. That's not the point. The point isn't to identify a problem and then try to distance yourself from it. The idea is to identify who you are and embrace it and accept it and say, all right, I'm very shy, or I'm very belligerent, or I'm very out there, or whatever it is you are. You just say, this is me. This is how I am. Now, is that how I want to be? And if the answer is yes, well, then you're fine. It's just the way you are, unless that runs into trouble out with the rest of the world. Then you'll have to rethink it. But it's to embrace who you are and live who you are and see how that works. If it works well, again, the people that aren't compatible with you go away. The people that are compatible with you come around. So you just see how that works for a while. But learning who you are, so you can be comfortable in your own skin. You can say, well, this is me. I'm okay. I'm a different person, just like everybody else. I've got all kinds of things going on. I'm an introvert. I'm an extrovert. Or I'm introverted sometimes and extroverted other times. I'd like to be more like this, but I'm a little afraid of that because I don't want to fail. I don't want to try and fail. That would be hard on me. So what am I going to do about that? Come up with a plan. How are you going to become in a way that you'd like to rather become than the way you are? So the meditation will give you that knowledge of yourself. If you're just there and you just have this maybe this thought in your mind, who am I? What am I? How am I? And just let those questions kind of rattle around in your head without thinking about them, because we don't want to get intellectual here. We want to stay in the intuitive side. So we don't want to think about it and analyze it. We just want to feel it. And as you feel those things, you will surprise yourself with the answers that come out. You will get to know yourself in a more fundamental way than you did before. So meditation state can be very valuable in finding out who you are. And how does that contrast with who you want to be? And what's the difference? You know, and is what you want to be really a good thing to be? Or is it just something that, you know, you want to be like the guy in the comic book? You're trying to be somebody else. And then you might look at that a while and decide that, oh, you really don't want to be somebody else because that doesn't feel natural to you. You want to be who you are, but you want to be maybe less shy or more confident. Well, how do you build confidence? Well, it's usually built with repetition. You do things, you try things, and you do them again and again until you feel comfortable with it. You have to push yourself a little bit out of the comfort, zone. You have to work at it. So the meditation is a really good idea, but not to go back and examine past lives. That can be amusing, but it's rarely helpful. It's helpful sometimes in a clinical sense. If you are regressing somebody into a past life and to try to come up with a reason of why they're so terrified of spiders, well, you might get something there. Now, whether that's really true that they were killed by a big spider last time and that's why they're so afraid of spiders, but that might just be in a very convenient answer, just a very convenient justification that a person can kind of hang up their fears on that hook and say, oh, that's all it is. It was just last lifetime I was killed by this big spider, that's all. And now they can maybe let go of some of that fear because they've been able to identify it and hang it on a hook and walk away from it. That's not me. That was last time. I'm different now. I don't have to be afraid of spiders just because of something that happened in the past. So that gives them courage. You see, now it may or may not have been true. That past lifetime may have just come up, may have been given by the larger consciousness system just to help them get over their fear. They may have not ever had anything bad to do with spiders in the last lifetime, but to give them that feeling that they did may help them deal with what they have to deal with. So they get that. Or it may be true. Maybe that is what their fear is. It doesn't matter, you see. If it helps them out, then it doesn't make any difference whether that's true or not true. It's irrelevant. Does it help them or not? What's the effect? That's what's important. So in that way, you can do past lives, and the larger conscious system will send you past lives that will help you grow up, because that's just one of the tools it has. It doesn't mean that any of it's true or any of it's not true. It might be true, might not be true. It's just information that if you take it seriously and work with it, will help you grow up. So do it, take it seriously, and use it to grow up. So it's a good thing. Don't worry about is this true or not. That's not really what's important. Is it helpful or not? Does it work? That's what's really important. So
that is a great point, because it, imagine if someone looked at how they were in a past life and discovered some sort of proclivity they had. They loved cooking. And then they emerge from their meditation state and say, this is what I've been messing up with this whole time. And then they try to, rearrange their life around a new profession when that may not have anything to do with it. It might have just been something that was on their mind, and then they end up reinterpreting,
Exactly.
But here's a question I have, and I've had this for a long time. What would you say to people who've been influenced by your theory, and have taken a similar direction with trying to grow themselves up, and who have an interest in certain parapsychological or psi phenomena like remote viewing, auto writing, precognition, and who've been at this kind of pursuit for like 10, 15, 20 years? What would you say that people could work on? And not just in, what I mean is growing their consciousness, but also integrating different kinds of, means. Is there something generally you could say to people who've been on this for the medium term, if you want to call it that?
Well, all the paranormal things are of very little importance of their own and by themselves. They're not all that significant, actually, but they're great training tools. They're great training tools. What they do is they help a person learn the things they need to learn to see bigger pictures, to understand more about the nature of reality. So in that way, they're helpful. Once you learn to do paranormal things, one of the things that goes with it, kind of another thing that happens by itself, is that you start seeing yourself as something small within a bigger picture. You no longer see yourself as, the physical actor out there, and you're one of 9 billion actors, and you're integrated in the world, and whoever can grab the most stuff and hang on to it is the winner. That's kind of your typical viewpoint of life and what it's all about. And instead of that, you start seeing yourself, oh, this reality is much more nuanced. This reality has a lot more going on for it. I can remote view, I can heal, I can, I can go out of body, I can do these things. I'm not very good at it yet, but I do all of them once in a while, enough to know that it's real stuff. But I've realized that there's a much bigger reality out there other than just the physical world. It's not just how I fit into the physical world and how I interact with other people. There's a bigger reality, a bigger purpose, a bigger cause. There's something else that I need to understand better. And that's what doing the paranormal will teach you. That's important. That's a very important lesson to learn. Now, whether you really get good at healing and remote viewing is beside the point. If you get good enough that you realize that the world is a lot more complex and interesting than just a physical reality, that there is a non-physical component to your reality, and it's called the subjective world. It's not the objective world. It's the world inside your head. And that it's not all just an illusion and a hallucination, but there's meaning and there's rules and there's processes and there's things that you can do, information you can gather, people that you can heal with your mind. And you learn that all these things are true and you can be effective with them. Then you start seeing yourself as a small part of something much bigger. And you start then searching for, what is that bigger thing I'm a small part of? And what am I supposed to be doing here anyway? What's the point of this? And what's my relation to that bigger thing? How am I a part of it, or it a part of me? And how does it all fit together? And that turns you into what's called a seeker. You start going to Google and asking about, big questions about reality, and you'll get stuff back. And it makes you think. So you try this and you try that, and that puts you on a path of a seeker who wants to learn and wants to grow and wants to find out. And that makes you a person of interest to the larger consciousness system, who will then start sending things to you and ideas and give you synchronicities that just happen to help, move you along a little bit, introduce you to just those people who are going to have a key effect on your life. Things happen because you're a person of interest. So that's really the point of the paranormal. It's like a pretty flower that attracts people. Oh, powers. I'd like to be able to remote view. I'd like to be able to heal with my mind. I'd like to be able to get rid of my headaches whenever I get one, with my mind. Those are skills and powers I'd like to have. Well, that's people when they first run into the stuff. Oh, I'd like to be able to do that too. That's a cool tool. That's a cool power to have. But then after they've learned to do it reasonably well, requires a lot of discipline, requires a lot of mental work, so they can clear their mind of extraneous thoughts. They have to learn how to just be without thinking. They have to learn to develop their intuitive side, because everything paranormal takes place in your intuitive side. Nothing paranormal ever takes place in your intellectual side. That's not where the paranormal lives. It lives solely in your intuitive side, in your subjective side. Well, you start developing that subjective side. You start getting acquainted with it. You start making friends with it. You start learning to trust it. You start getting information that's helpful in your life. And all of that just helps you see that you're part of a bigger picture, turns you into a seeker. So the paranormal is good as a set of exercises to help you practice discipline of the mind. And it's good because it teaches you that you're a small part of something much bigger, and that the subjective world is bigger and more significant than the objective world. The objective world is just the stage and all the props. The subjective world is the play that's being played in the minds of the actors. That's where the interest is. Nobody goes to a play to watch the props. The props just aren't the big deal. It's the play, it's the interactions, it's the dialogue and the meaning and the significance and the connections. That's what people go to a play to see. So you realize that you'd rather be part of the play than one of the props. That being a prop is okay. You got a body, that's a prop. It's a physical thing. All right, now, what are you going to do with that? Well, you're limited to what you can do with that. You can walk, you can talk, you can work, you can do things, you can drive a car. But what about your mind? What can you do with that? Oh, the list is much bigger. There's lots of things you can do with your mind, and they're a lot more significant. Things like beauty, trust, justice. All of those things are not objective. They're all subjective. So all the things in the world that are the most meaningful to you, the most significant, are subjective. Your relationship with somebody's subjective. There's an objective part too. You like their body, they like your body. There's a subjective part. You get in your car and you drive someplace. Well, that's part of the objective world. But again, it's the props. It's the stuff you use to help you connect on a deeper level than just the physical. Relationships go much deeper than the physical. They're all subjective. It's caring. It's sharing. It's being a part of something. It's belonging. All those things are subjective. And that's what's really important in this life, is the subjective stuff. The objective stuff is just there, rocks and trees and mountains. And that stuff's nice. You like being in a big, primal forest that you can walk around in and talk to the trees and feel peace and all that. So the objective world is nice. It can be nice, and it's fun. You get on a roller coaster and take a ride. That's fun and exciting, but it's not deep, meaningful. It's superficial. It doesn't really define who you are and how you are. All that's in the subjective world. So when you realize that all of the stuff that is most important to you in your life, like relationship, almost always is subjective, and that the subjective world has rules and has structure. If you just learn how to use it, you can develop that subjective side of your mind to be more reliable, more accurate, and more useful than your intellect ever was. Your intellect is still good. It helps you find your car keys. It helps you get home at night. There's a lot of things you need your objective mind. You need to assess things. You need to analyze things. You need to make judgments. All that's done over on the intellectual side. It's very necessary. But that's not where the meaning and significance and value of your life is. Your life is in the living, in the connection, and all of that's subjective. So developing your subjective mind is very significant and very important. And in our culture, the subjective mind is thrown away as a hallucination. And the objective part, your logical part, is held up to be the only thing that's really dependable and worthwhile. So people live through their intellects, and they don't pay much attention to their subjective side. So they get very out of balance. They get so out of balance that when they try to develop their subjective side, the intellect comes in and shuts it down. The intellect comes in and starts making judgments about, are you doing it right? Are you doing this? Are you doing it? You say, oh, hey, Uncle Fred, you've been dead for a decade, but I want to talk to you. And then you hear something in your mind that says, hello, this is your Uncle Fred. And your intellect jumps in and said, oh, did I just really hear that? Or did I just make that up? Was that me in my imagination making that up? So as soon as the intellect jumps in and starts to judge it, it's gone. You're not connected anymore. Your intellect just trashed your intuitive state, because the intellect is dominant, because that's what our culture does. It tells us all that the intellect's important and that the intuitive side is imaginary. And we believe that because we believe what our culture tells us for the most part. So we tend to be very out of balance. So that's why meditation is good. It helps pull us back into balance with our subjective and our intellectual side. You need both. And once you gain that balance, then the two work together. Instead of one dominating the other, your intuitive side gathers the information you need. Your intellectual side takes that information and assesses it and processes it and kind of tells you what it all means. But the two work together and they hand things off. Intuition says, here, logic, go analyze this and tell me what it means. And the logic says, hey, intuitive side, how do I figure this out? What's the information I need to know? What's going to happen 10 years later if I take this path than if I take this other path? And you get the download of that information and probability. And then the two just work together, pass things over to each other. And now you got a, you're a whole person. And you find that a whole person tends to live primarily in their intuitive side and uses their intellectual side as necessary, because the intuitive side is, like we said, it's richer. There's more meaning there. There's more significance there. And they use their intellect as a tool to help them sort and assess and analyze and judge. But they mostly don't believe what the intellect says, because the intellect almost never has enough information to truly be deductive in its conclusions. Deductive logic requires lots of information, and the intellect doesn't have all that information. So it's guessing. And instead of just guessing, it needs to go call up the intuitive side and get some useful information about that rather than guessing. And that's the way they learn to work together. The paranormal stuff is just by itself, in and of itself, is not important. As a training tool and as an attractor to people to get them interested in developing their intuitive side, well, that's mainly its function. But once you get good at it, you stop using it. You don't need it anymore. You don't use it because you don't want to create a bubble around yourself and live in a manufactured reality. You'd much rather just live in the reality as it comes to you. You learn a lot more that way.
I'm wondering now if you would say that, because it was very enlightening, and I had a lot of thoughts while you were talking, especially about the big ideas of justice and truth and beauty and relationships as being a part of the subjective world, because I think that it's possible that many people make a mistake in thinking that those same subjects are highly intellectual and are thereby earthly, or are concerned with the here and now, because we apprehend them through language, and that makes them intellectual. When it sounds to me like what people might find to be the opposite, which would be, of course, feelings, especially gut feelings and intuitions, but then all of the psi activities, as that's what's subjective. And I think that that is a very poor bifurcation, because then we're just making a sliver of some things that are, I don't know if you agree, but I'd like to hear, supplemental or, extraneous, because it's just a reminder of what the real point is. And that misappropriates the attention that should be paid. Now, I do wonder then also if you would say that when people are involved in, say, philosophic writing or creating beauty, oftentimes I have a friend who's learning to draw, and the process is extremely analytical because you're trying to, adjust proportions and shading, and you're doing a lot of measurement. But there is some aspect of drawing where inspiration heavily is involved. So can you comment on any of that? Because I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit.
Yes, I can contribute to some of that. Yes, people often do think that the subjective is just very difficult objective things. So they'll look at a relationship and they'll say, well, I could just figure out this relationship. If I could figure out what she was thinking and what she was feeling, then everything would be fine. But I have trouble doing that. And they see everything as an intellectual. They think all the world and everything and all the interactions with it are all part of the intellect. They're all logical. Well, we tend to think we're logical when we are not. We're very good at pretending that we are logical. And if you ask people, are you rational and logical? They'd say, sure, that's the way I am most of the time. That's the way I live. I'm very rational and very logical. But if you actually analyzed it, you'd see that it was very rarely that they were ever logical. We hardly ever have enough information to actually, compute a deductive result. So if you realize that the logic is very limited, then what you're doing is you're doing little bits and pieces of logic with a little bit of pieces of the information you have, and then you're taking great leaps. But you're not good at those leaps. They're as often wrong as they are right because you've never developed your intuitive side. You just get to a point and you take some leap to the answer because you don't have the information, and mostly it turns out wrong. So you get an attitude that the intuitive side is a lot of baloney, and it's mostly, it's a 50-50. It's just as easily wrong as it is right. That's because you're approaching the whole thing as everything that is real is objective, and anything that's subjective is not real. It's fantasy, it's hallucination, it's just mind tricks. It's the way you feel. But your feelings are not really objective. They're just things we deal with, and you're really better off without those feelings. You should just suppress them and not worry too much about the feelings. Be more intellectual, be less feeling. And that way you will never be very happy and you'll never be very sad. You'll just always be right there in the middle with your intellect, and there'll be no joy, but there'll be no sorrow either. You'll be in that mind space and you will live a very sterile life that has very little joy in it. And happiness will elude you. As time goes by, you'll feel that life is kind of empty and not very meaningful. And anyway, that's kind of the life of the left brain intellectual. The point of meditation is to teach you that there is a subjective side called mind, and that your intention is very powerful. You can use your intent to modify future probability. You can use your intent to gather information. But there's a lot of things you can do, and with practice, they can be very reliable and very accurate. But it takes practice. Most people don't go places that take a lot of practice. I mean, everybody is capable of playing a piano, even being a concert pianist. It's like everybody's capable of that, but only very few people ever get to that skill, that level, because it takes a lot of practice, a lot of work, and a lot of effort, and a lot of dedication. And most people just don't have that much dedication to put that much time into it because there's so many other things vying for their time. So though everybody could be a concert pianist, only probably 1/100th of 1% of them actually are. Maybe 1,000th of 1% of them actually are. Well, it's the same with developing your intuitive side. A lot of people take a few steps in that direction. A lot of people play with it. A lot of people dally with it and read about it. Then very few people ever really develop it at the point that they're like the equivalent to a concert pianist. They play with it a bit, but they don't take it too seriously. And after a while, they leave it alone. So it's just kind of a part of their life where they were interested, and they proved to themselves that the paranormal exists, and they did a few amazing things and had some amazing experiences, but eventually it kind of drifts away because it's not all that pertinent. So that's anything that is complex takes a lot of time to learn, and it takes a lot of dedication to get there. It has to become a part of who you are. It has to be something that's deep inside of you that makes that connection. Otherwise, it's not worth the trouble.
Love is the answer. If there's one way to discover this truth that Tom Campbell, physicist and consciousness expert, has concluded, it is through your own experience. Give yourself the gift of experiencing yourself. After all, Tom has stated so many times that if it's not your experience, it's not your truth. So learn to experience with Tom's Exploring Consciousness and Everything Paranormal program, and unlock those natural abilities for yourself. Discover why love is the answer. Binaural beats included to assist you. Details are in the description below. Thank you.
I and MBT Events hope you like this video. If you do, then you should consider being a Patreon member, because Patreon members get early access to our special content. You will also be able to get your questions answered by me in special Q&A sessions, and most importantly, your contribution as a patron member will enable us to produce the content that you're looking for. So thank you.